Hello everyone, and welcome to your Masters in Management. My name's Sandy, and today we'll be discussing organizational behavior. Now today we're here with not just an expert in the field, someone with a doctorate specialized in organizational behavior. So we'll be speaking and sharing his expertise with us today, Dr. Bono.
Hello.
Hello, and thank you again for being with us today.
Yes, it's a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Thanks. Ma'am, let's start off with our usual introductory question. How would you define organizational behavior?
Thank you for putting this question forward, because this is a very, very interesting question. As you well know, organizations are made up of people. And people actually behave, they react to one another, they react to circumstances, and whenever there's an organization and there's people, there are a lot of dynamics which are happening constantly. Organizational behavior is the way people within a defined structure, which we then generally term as an organization, behave while interacting with one another, while interacting with their work, while interacting internally, and while interacting externally. Gone are those days when organizational psychologists used to say that people at work should be different from people at home. We are talking about one individual. And one individual is not a switch-on, switch-off person. So whatever is happening at home is definitely affecting you directly and indirectly, willingly and unwillingly, at what you're doing at the place of work. Anything which happens at work, you're taking with you at home. Even though managers, and this is the difference between managers and leaders, managers would expect their employees to leave their home problems at home and to leave their work problems at work. This is not true. This cannot be done. Organizational behavior is therefore a system-wide organization dynamic where all the employees, being directly or indirectly employed, interact with one another. What makes an organization tick? What makes an organization successful? What makes an organization go forward? Undoubtedly, it is people. It is employees. Now, you understand very well, because you are also an expert in the field, that organizational behavior is not a byproduct. It is not something that you buy off the shelf, because people develop their relationship as time goes by.
True.
You start in a particular group, you start working in a particular environment where you don't know one another. You start building a relationship, you start trusting, you start understanding, you start behaving according to the way other people behave towards you. There are problems, you start reacting to a problem. So it is an ongoing process. An organizational behavior, as I said earlier on, is not a switch-on, switch-off mentality. It is an ongoing process which varies from one day to another, which builds from the next day. And as a number of communicologists used to say, whatever is said cannot be written off. You can apologize, you can do a lot of things, but whatever is done cannot be written off. So behavior affects the organization performance. Behavior affects the way the organization organizes itself and develops itself. We need to understand one very important thing, that organizations are made up of groups, and the organizational behavioral theories also explain the difference between turning a group into a team, which is very difficult, contrary to what might people think. You will understand that in an informal setting, we choose our friends. In an informal setting, we choose who to go out with. We choose those friends that we would like to go and watch a film or watch a football game or whatever we want to do. Why? Because we like their company, we like the way they behave, we like the way they react.
We get along with them. Yeah.
We get along with them very well. But at the place of work, this is something completely different. Very often, you don't choose your work colleagues. Someone else chooses them for you. And over there, it is even more difficult to therefore build a relationship. Yeah. You well know that there are a number of theories, which we will be doing as part of this module as well, how to turn groups into teams. And groups go through different phases. You know, there's the forming phase where a number of people get together even when a new employee is joining the team. then very often there's a storm happening somewhere. So there's the storming phase when there could be an argument, which is important. Some people may think that arguments at the place of work are not healthy. As long as you know how to manage them, they're healthy.
I agree.
If you don't know how to manage them, if they go out of hand, then they're going to create a lot of problems. Then there's going to be the norming phase, so we agree how we're going to work. And it's only after you go through these three phases that the group starts developing itself into a team and you start performing. When you start performing, you start reaching the organizational objectives. Now, what managers and leaders in particular try to do is they try to expedite these three phases immediately so that the performance phase would be reached as much and as fast as possible. However, the behavior of a team, the behavior of individuals at the place of work is not one direction. So it can go back as well. The minute a member within a team changes, so there's an addition, or there's a new member, someone left and then a new member is joining the team, rest assured that the dynamics within that particular group, because it turns back into a group, is going to change as well. We have to start all over again. We have to start building the dynamics all over again. Consequently, organizational behavior, or rather the way people behave in the organization, is definitely an ongoing process, is definitely changing from day to day, sometimes we say hour to hour. And in smaller organizations, it's not easier than bigger organizations. On the other hand, it tends to be more difficult because an organization of 10, 15, 20 people, if there are the different groups of 5, so basically you've got 4 cohorts there. Mm-hmm. And if something happens to one of this cohort, then you've got 1/3, 1/4 of the organization which is in problems, which is in trouble. Whereas when you are managing an organization of 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 people, which you are bound as well to have these issues, but at least it is more, diversified in different areas of that particular organization. So to go back to your question, is there possibly one definition? A lot of authors have tried to define this in one definition. For example, 2 authors that comes to mind with a particular standard book, Heiliger and Slocum, they try to define organizational behavior as a system-wide organizational network where different individuals interact with one another. It's a standard definition. A more practical definition, I would say, it is the way employees in an organization setting react to one another. Now, I usually tell, colleagues, employees, and in our consulting work as well, you are bound to have people who do not agree. You are bound to have people who maybe at times they cannot see eye to eye, because do understand that employees in an organization, they come from a different background, they come from a different culture, they come from a different setting, they come from a different frame of mind, and different families, different values. And one is trying to put all these different employees, all these different diversified networks in one particular network. And we are expected that magic happens, and magic does not happen. So all these different values, all these different perceptions, all these different beliefs, all these different ideas are bound to have a different network in that particular organization. And you will find that some people are very extrovert, some people are more introvert, some people are more strong, some people tend to make their argument stronger, some people tend to, hold back, not to disrupt and not to annoy maybe their managers or their bosses. So it is one thing for sure, it's a very complex area. Mm-hmm. And though there have been a lot of studies, research has shown over the last 20, 30 years that a lot of different studies have been carried out, and we are very lucky to have so many different research and papers and articles. But as yet, there's one caveat in each and every paper, that although we're trying to understand, we cannot assume that the conclusions of one paper can be adopted in any other organizations, because Organizations vary in size, they vary in nature, they vary in the level of mechanisticity, they vary in the level of organisticity. Some organizations are more market driven, some organizations are more technologically driven, some organizations are a monopoly, other organizations operate in a duopoly, other organizations are operating in high competition, so they put pressure, more pressure on their employees. The market is constantly changing. So this is not a one definition that can be assumed throughout, but it is the understanding, and this is how I would define to conclude and to answer your first question. The way I would define organizational behavior is primarily understanding the way people behave in an organization setting where there are a number of internal and external factors which are constantly changing, and this is the key. If we think that things around us and things within the organization are not changing, then we're going to be static. We all know that things are changing so fast, it is so dynamic, that people are reacting differently. What is going to happen, for example, what happened rather than what is going to happen when there were problems in the financial markets? How did employees behave? What happens when an organization loses a very big tender? What happens there? You would see there's going to be changes in the way the employees interact between one another. So there are so many internal and external factors which are constantly affecting the internal relationships, and therefore the study of organizational behavior is looking into the internal and external factors and applying them within a context so that one can, as much as possible, anticipate the behavior. Because when you anticipate behavior, you can do something about it.
You have a bit more management of it that way.
Precisely.
Okay. Dr. De Bono, we spoke about how internal and external factors influence behavior within the organization and the individual. I'd like to go on to the psychological traits of the individual, of the employee. How do their traits influence their behavior at work?
You know as much as I do, maybe you know more than I do, that each and every one of us, we bring with us a baggage. And this baggage influences the way we perceive our work. For example, the two main differences that we usually talk about are that some employees choose a job because they like it. So their perception, their psychological readiness towards that particular job varies considerably from another employee in the same organization doing the same job but has taken that job because it pays well. So for one employee, the first employee, the former employee, it could be a career. For the second employee, that is a job. So the way they relate to their job, and therefore if they are relating to their job to their work environment, and if the work environment to other colleagues, varies considerably. I mean, we both experienced in our work and in our consulting work situations where we had employees where basically they attend work not because they have, that's their job basically. So how do they look into their job? In a very poor, narrow way. So basically it's an 8 to 5 or a 9 to 5 job, and they do their part, and then on a Friday evening they close their computer and off they go, and they curse the fact that they have to come back on a Monday morning, because for them it is a job. Whatever you tell them, it's a problem. Whatever job you give them, it becomes an issue. So a solution becomes a problem. Those who are in a career, those who like their job, actually find a solution in a problem. So at times these employees, you have to beg them to go home. These employees, you have to ask them, look, it's time that you close literally what you're doing and you go home. Why? Because their psychological readiness to what they do and to the work environment differs considerably. These are two extremes. And while we can look at these two extremes as, two very important points, now we both know that it is never the case. So it is organizational behavior because employees fluctuate in their psychological readiness, in their psychological contracting. Maybe we can speak about also the issues related to psychological contracting later on, but their psychological readiness to the place of work, to the work environment, to what they do, and to their colleagues around them. Some people also manage to turn the place of work in a social place, where basically they find friends there, they share their concerns, which may not necessarily be work-related. So at times, if you manage to make friends and find friends and develop this particular environment at the place of work, that is the healthiest place possible. If on the other hand, you're going to the place of work and the place of work is a place where you're finding yourself that you're only confined doing your job, it becomes too mechanistic, it becomes too routine, and basically you would be looking forward so that 5 o'clock strikes and you go back at home. The psychological readiness also affects the team because we smell the environment, if you know what I'm trying to say. We can identify what's happening. Those who, like you, have been trained in organizational behavior, we can understand, visualize, and monitor not only from what people say, but most often from how they say it and what they do.
The nonverbals.
The nonverbals, particularly the facial expressions, say much more than people actually say. And those who are very emotional, sometimes they don't have to say anything, but we can identify that people may have issues at home, and a person who is well trained would recognize that a colleague or an employee or a subordinate or a manager has some issues. So at that particular point in time, you have to be careful as well the way you relate in a psychological way, not to disrupt further the work environment. So the readiness, the psychological readiness and the psychological awareness at the place of work is something which has been given more importance, I would say, over the last decade. Am I happy with the developments? In my opinion, not yet, no. Because we still have work environments where the psychological awareness, the psychological readiness of employees is not seen. And this is not because employees are not changing or employees are not trying. It is because, in a humble manner I can say this, that a lot of managers are being promoted by virtue of their experience and their expertise in a technical area, and not by virtue of their managerial and leadership training. So their major concern has become output and not the behavioral part which can lead to that output. So these people very often they fail to understand the direct correlation that exists between job satisfaction, between we use the word motivation. Sometimes we abuse the word motivation, and I hate to use the word motivation because it is too much abused. But these people fail to understand the direct correlation that exists between job satisfaction and performance.
Could you give us some examples about that, please?
Yeah. Job satisfaction is made up of a number of factors. What satisfies you at the place of work? Generally, there are 3 things which lead to job satisfaction: work itself, the work environment, and the people around you. Now, yes, there are a number of other sub-factors related to these, but if these 3 pillars are at the place of work, generally employees is more engaged. And this is another term that we use, In organizational behavior, we use terms like job satisfaction, engagement, commitment, and they all mean different things, even though, for the less experienced person in organizational behavior, they could mean the same thing. So the job satisfaction is not an antecedent. A job satisfaction is a result. So it is the result of something else. So if it is a result of something else, I cannot expect that an employee starts with job satisfaction. I have to assume that an employee starts from 0 job satisfaction. And in order to have job satisfaction, I need to create the work environment. I need to find, as much as possible, people that fit within a team. I need to ensure that the job itself is composed of those aspects which motivate a person to actually do that kind of job. And we all know that we look for different realities at the place of work. Some people hate to do repetitive work. Other people excel at repetitive work. Some people are very meticulous in what they do. Other people are more artistic in what they do. So in order to bring this level of job satisfaction, which is not an antecedent but it's a result, the role of the leader, and I speak constantly about leaders in organizations and not managers in organizations. The trend has been over the last decade, this is not something new, that we don't need managers anymore. We need leaders. And in order to engage leaders in organizations, we need to really understand. Unfortunately, Sandy, this is one of the subjects where even at academic perspective, we label it as a soft area. I think it's the hardest area. Because if you go and ask a lot of leaders and managers, which is the hardest part of their job, they all come and tell you it's the management of people. And why? Because people are unpredictable, because behavior is unpredictable, because behavior is not set in a frame. Behavior changes according to the surroundings, as we said in the first question, according to the internal and external surroundings. So yes, that relationship between job satisfaction, output, performance is there. And this all belongs to the area of how the psychological readiness of employee at the place of work is composed. The psychological readiness also varies by age, varies by hierarchical structure in an organization, varies by type of organization, varies between blue-collar workers, white-collar workers, tradesmen. It is expected. And research has actually shown where these variances are. A good leader needs to understand these variances. A good leader needs to understand that a team at the place of work is not a bed of roses every time. A team at the place of work is bound to have conflicts, is bound to have issues. The trick is whether these issues can be solved. And hopefully most of the issues can be solved, only if the parties are ready to solve them.
True. So my next question is, what is OCB? And how does it differ to job involvement?
Now, this is a good question. OCB is the acronym for Organizational Citizenship Behaviour. Some people mix it from OCD to OCB. No, OCB is the Organizational Citizenship Behaviour. In plain vanilla English, Organizational Citizenship Behaviour is how much the employee is ready to go that extra mile from the normal course of work in order to ensure that the job performance, that the organizational performance is reached. This is, a textbook definition of organizational citizenship behavior. There are a number of different facets of organizational different behavior. For example, continuance readiness, continuance commitment, effective commitment. So, and a number of other areas, but these two pillars are mostly two very consonant pillars in the study of organization and citizenship behavior. The difference between OCB and
job involvement.
OCB leads to job involvement. Now, let me explain the difference. Employees generally start a job highly motivated. It's expected. Employees start their job highly willing to do everything possible. Why? They want to impress, they want to show their talent, they want to show how much they know, they want to show their colleagues that they fit within the organization. That might disrupt others, what we said earlier on in the teamwork, because others in the team may say, oh, who's this person?
Yeah.
What is she trying to do? What is he trying to do? Is he trying to make us feel less important? Is he trying to show off? Is she trying to show off? So this is a balance, This is what I said earlier on, that when a new member joins a team, there's very often this checks and balances between the team members. So the first week, first 2 weeks, there's this suspicion going on. Generally, job performance drops. In some organizations where there's no direct control over output, we would see that performance generally drops much more than we think. Not because the employee who's joining is learning, but because others would even try to slow down, to influence also the other employee to find a balance in the output and the production. So OCB is the readiness. Organizational citizenship behavior is the level of commitment the employee feels towards the organization. Now, what makes an employee committed towards an organization? Again, the study of organizational behavior is not black or white, but there's a lot of gray. You build commitment to the organization only if, in the course of your employment, the organization has shown towards you level of commitment towards the individual, the person, the readiness to learn, the readiness to produce, the readiness to deliver. So there needs to be a dual relationship, a two-way relationship between the employee and the organization, and the organization and the employee. So for the employee to involve himself or herself in the job, the employee needs to find that there are the right avenues to do so. There are certain organizations where employees do not involve themselves in the job more than their job entails. It's not because they can't do so. It's because they perceive, because a lot of perception also takes place here. Management and managing people is very often about managing perceptions.
That's true.
So employees believe, they perceive that the organization is not giving them the opportunity to involve themselves more, either because they're not appreciated, or because whenever they try to do so, they have not been recognized, or because, the organization feels that that's someone else to do it, or because it's not directly your job, or because your colleagues would not feel good if you try to go beyond your call of duty. So the level of involvement, once again, is not an antecedent. And I keep on emphasizing these things, that satisfaction, involvement, behavior, these are not antecedents, but these are effects. These are the resultant factor that results from something else. To engage employees at the place of work, to ensure that there is more organizational citizenship behavior at the place of work, to ensure that employees in general are more committed towards their job, the organization, and the output as a whole, there has to be a trajectory. And this trajectory is vested upon the leader, is vested upon the manager, is vested upon that person who is guiding, who is mentoring, who is in a way also controlling the output of that particular employee. So organizational citizenship behavior is a term which is very often defined as that level of extra commitment, that level of extra involvement, that level of extra readiness that the employee is ready to give. There were times when, for example, we did a survey amongst employees working in the financial service. And one of the questions which we asked them was, would you change the bank, because the financial institution was a bank, and if the other bank offers you, twice as much your salary? Those employees who had high level of commitment, of organizational commitment, organizational citizenship commitment, behavior, readiness towards the organization, said that even if the other bank, if the other financial institution would give them twice as much the salary, they wouldn't go. Because they feel that they are attached to that particular organization, institution, and they would feel like they're betraying the institution to go to a competitor. You still find employees, particularly those employees who have been employed with the organization for 25 years, 30 years. We still find these employees, even though today's employee market is changing very rapidly. And today's employee market, we see that employees are changing jobs more frequently. It has advantages, but it also has disadvantages because it is creating problems to employees and to organizations themselves. But there are employees who have been there for 25 years. So they feel, when you talk to these people, what they tell you? That the organization has basically been part of their family. They've bred the family, they've manage to raise a family because they have worked in this particular organization. So they feel very loyal to that particular organization. These employees do not grow on trees. Employees who are ready to accept and ready to give themselves an opportunity to learn more about the organization and to be part of the organization do not grow on trees. Because we are living in an instant coffee world. We are living in a world where employees, they want to get things done faster, quicker, with less effort, and potentially make more money faster. So some employees even do not have the patience to develop themselves in a job. They don't have the readiness to give the organization an opportunity for them to develop in that particular role. There are few employees who also understand that it is up to them how much they grow in an organization, and that their job develops in an organization, and an organization only develops if they develop. And you know, this employee market, because right now, as we are recording this, we are living in an employee market. Right now, these employees are conditioning even the way organizations are reacting. So what is happening? We are trading organizational behavior. We are trading organizational citizenship behavior. In plain vanilla English, we are trading relationships at the place of work to financial deals. And the only way some organizations are trying to attract and retain employees is not by talking to them, is not by building up a relationship, is not by giving careers, is not by showing that the organization also belongs to the organization, is not by showing them continuance, commitment, even by the way the organization, for example, gave its rewards and gave its performance, or by the way the effective commitment it reacts to the different issues and problems. This is the real meaning of having a leader at the place of work. But we are trading this by giving financial packages. So we are attracting people from one organization to another by giving better financial deals, by giving better salaries, by giving the better, package as a whole, which constitutes a number of different things. And like that, employees are trading their job to a financial output. Now, you could well tell me, but the financial output has always been important. Yes. But I can put a question to you. How many times have we carried out surveys in organizations or while we are teaching and we tell students, if you had to rate what are the most 5 important things in an organization, where do they put motivation? Do they put it the first?
Yeah, amongst the first. True.
Yeah, but is it financial motivation?
That's part of it. The finance aspect, and then the job satisfaction and the will to work. But yeah, money is always one of those key factors that comes up.
Yeah, it is
An
always
external,
one of those factors that come up, particularly amongst the young ones. The older the employee goes, then you would find employees who are more ready to trade off their financial package to better working conditions, to better place at work, to better relationships, to probably less hassle, to probably more days off. Why? Because their priorities change.
True.
So the younger we are, our priority is maybe the financial output, the financial outlay, the financial packet. The older we get, because we could be more stable in life, because we could have raised the family, because we could have paid our loans, therefore that financial deal becomes less important, and time with the family becomes even more precious. And time to yourself becomes more precious. And having that weekend off without having to worry becomes more precious. So this trading of commitment is constantly varying. So OCB, the organizational citizenship behavior, is the relationship that exists between the organization and the employee. It is, again, a two-way relationship. We cannot expect the employee to be committed if the organization is not committed to the employee. And commitment is not only what you say, but what you do, starting with the place of work, starting with the environment, starting with the conditions, starting with the opportunities, starting with the career development. So starting with, challenging the employee to do something else, challenging the employee to do something which the employee never thought he or she would be able to do. Learning a skill is as precious as giving someone a raise and a salary. Because there the employee is becoming more valuable and more employable. And unfortunately, sometimes we do not give too much importance to this.
True. Okay. So my next question, and we had briefly mentioned it in our earlier questions, is what is a psychological contract and how can we use this in management?
Well, psychological contract, I would say, is much more important than any other legal contract. A legal contract is a paper signed between two parties according to the laws of a particular country. And if something happens, that the relationship is governed, totally governed by the rules, by the law which governs that particular relationship. Some legal contracts are broken. People are taken to court. Court interprets and misinterprets contracts. And there it goes. And it stops there. A psychological contract is much more deeper. It is how the employee and the organization, I usually say the organization and not the employer. I hate the word employer because the employer is like, that
power,
that father figure who is there giving you an opportunity to work. I hate that. So it is the employee and the organization. A psychological contract is the way the two bodies, which is the organization on one hand and the employee on the other, interact with one another, relate to one another, without the need of actually having to abide by a job description, by a legal contract, by what needs to be done, but what needs not to be done. A psychological contract is the ultimate level of commitment. When someone is psychologically committed, someone is giving himself or herself in his or her totality towards the output of that organization. Psychological contracting is a term which has been used, I would say, over the last 10, 12 years. Although even before it was mentioned, it was also mentioned, in the late 1940s and the 1950s after the Hawthorne experiments in particular. And it was used because at that particular time, they've tried to understand how those employees who are on a definite contract and those employees who are engaged for a job, they vary in the level of commitment and performance. Psychological contracting is the way the two parties, the employee and the organization, react, interact, behave, and trust. You cannot expect the two parties to manage the relationship unless there's trust of one another. So I am trusting that the employee, he's a professional, is doing his or her job without the need of actually being controlled, without the need of actually being monitored, without the need of actually being told, because the employee is suitable enough, is well versed to identify the priorities, what needs to be done and what not needs to be done. On the other hand, the employee feels safe, feels confident that the employer, the organization, is doing everything possible to ensure that this relationship fosters towards better relationships, that these relationships will bring along better work, will bring along a better environment, will bring along more respect, more trust, better growth, more career opportunities. And there's no need to actually write it in a legal framework. There are some cultures, particularly when we will be doing intercultural, where, as a matter of fact, psychological contracting precedes any other contract. There are some cultures that even in order to do business, if you try to discuss business in the first couple of meetings, they would definitely not do any business with you because they would feel that the transaction is too business oriented, and you are not trying to build up a relationship with that particular party. Some Asian cultures in particular, and when we speak about power distance, and these particular cultures, it shows as well. They consider the psychological contracting, because psychological contracting today is not only the relationship between the employer and the employee, it is also there used in international business. It is also used in different frames. So in this particular international context, the psychological contracting is also an understanding of building trust and relationship. If I don't trust you, I don't want to do any business with you. If I don't trust you, I don't employ you. If I don't trust you, I don't want to be employed with you. So trust, understanding, commitment, performance. Performance is the outcome, is the result, is the effect, is the last thing that one can look for. If we try to inverse the whole thing and we try to put performance before anything else, the probability is that there's going to be no commitment, there's going to be no organizational citizenship behavior. We're going to have more groups than teams. We're going to have less people, committed to one another, and there's going to be more control by management. This is why today we are actually claiming that it is so important to inverse organizations. It is so important to look into how organizations are framed, to look how organizations are structured and organized, and to identify if that is the right format, and to identify if today's world, we're living in so much of a virtual reality, whether these structural silos make sense anymore. However, it is very difficult to avoid silos because people tend to do what they like to do, and they like to do it how they want to do it. So because they feel confident, they feel comfortable, and if someone else tries to tell them that that's not the right way to do it, they very often, find it very difficult to change. So to go back to your question, psychological contracting is the ultimate way of ensuring that there is complete commitment, trust, and positive relationship between the two major parties, the two major stakeholders in an organization, which is the organization where there could be the owner, there could be the manager, there could be the leader, those who are managing, and the employee who is, rather than being viewed as a subordinate, is viewed as a partner. So the psychological contracting is bringing the parties, two or more, together in a partnership. And when there's a partnership, there's trust. When there's trust, we don't need to put it in writing. Okay? So this is what people would expect. Is it happening? Not always. Because we are living too much in a legal framework, and we do expect that everything is documented, to feel safe and to feel comfortable.
True. Okay, Dr. De Bono, and my last question for today is, you yourself as a managing director, what practical tips could you give us in the management of behavior in organizations?
Probably this is the most difficult question. I have managed big organizations, smaller organizations. I would say that there are 3-4, tips which I would try to give. First of all is you need to trust. I always say that everyone, every student, every employee starts with 100%. And it is really up to that employee to keep that 100% or to lose from that 100%. So over that, it's a positive reinforcement of behavior. This is my first tip. I try to show this by having, the open door policy is a cliche. But an open door policy means that you don't lock your office doors. There are no secrets in the office. But the relationship is so strong that employees know exactly their parameters. Why? Because it is an open door policy where trust is a priority. Secondly, and this is probably the most difficult, is trying to talk as much as possible to members of the organization. You know, I hate the word employees, and I hate even more the word boss. You try to talk individually and as a group to people from time to time. This is the most difficult. Time consuming, yes. Is it always seen in the right framework? No. But trying to understand, trying to talk, and trying to figure out that, you know, people have their on days and off days as well is a priority. Is a priority that you have to give to yourself, that you have to say, okay, today, you know, I'm not myself. Today, you know, I am only working on a 50% capacity, or I'm only working on a 25%. You have to expect this, and you have to talk to people at the same time, offer them help and give space. My motto has always been over the last years, if I know that someone needs help, offer help, but then give space. Because people differ, you know, some people behave so differently. Some people, when you offer help, they immediately take it. Others would say, yes, I'll tell you if I need it. And you have to respect both on the same level. Thirdly, I think that people need to be challenged. Some members, employees in an organizations do not actually realize their potential, and they need someone else to understand their own potential. And leaders very often understand the potential of others better than the employees themselves. Why? Because they have a more experience in identifying that people can develop more talent. So I think that our role is to develop talent. Is that when you see that the employee has an opportunity, has a window of opportunity to develop his or her talent more, it is our duty to give that employee that opportunity. So I keep on repeating, you can only fail yourself. Our role is not to try and fail anyone, you can only fail yourself. So give employees every window of opportunity. Our role is to surround ourselves with people better than we are. This is what makes you a good leader. And we don't hire people to tell them what to do. We have to hire good people to tell us what to do. So giving people also an opportunity to express, to develop, to come up with ideas. And this is where, you know, sometimes the team has this imbalance because behaviors are different, people react differently. So trust, openness, challenge, identifying potential, developing talent, these are the true meaning of what organizational behavior is on practical terms. The books, the theories says a lot of things. On practical terms is, you know, being there literally, I wouldn't say as a servant because maybe it's too much of a cliche as well, but partnering with your members, partnering with your employees to identify how you can develop their full potential.
Okay. Well, Dr. De Bono, thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
And that pretty much concludes all the questions I have for you today.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you once again for being with us and sharing your expertise and practice and knowledge with us today.
And those were excellent questions.
Very much in your line.
Thank you.
So there you have it. Today we discussed organizational behavior, where we looked into different facets of organizational behavior, such as the definition of it. We looked into OCB and job involvement and loyalty, job satisfaction and performance, and we also ended up with some practical tips of how to manage different behaviors in an organization. That's it for today. Thank you, and see you next time.